I'm going to go ahead and start if you're okay to start.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. All right, so as per my professor for my graduate school, of course, we have been attending and we have been learning all about effective leadership within a campus, as I am a student who is pursuing a master's in education in curriculum and instruction. So they did assign us to go ahead and interview either like an instructional coach or a leader from a campus. So I chose you because you've shown over and over again what it means to be an effective school leader when it comes to, discussing curriculum with your teachers, going over data, analyzing more than anything the data, and providing those strategies when it comes to helping students, when it comes to aiding teachers as well. So I had a few questions if you could do me the honors of answering. So first and foremost, I don't know if you want to kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background, your teaching background, and what you're doing as of right now.
Okay, yes. Hi, my name is Lorena Llerena. I am currently, I will be serving my 6th year as a curriculum coach, Cactus Trails, but I'm moving to a different school now. I have been in education for about 30 plus years. I have been in several educational positions, such as teacher's assistant, substitute, and then teaching, and then, of course, now curriculum coach. I continue to enjoy my job. I think it's a passion that I have, and I just, love education. Originally, I don't think that was going to be, a part of my, of what I wanted to do in life, but I found my calling, and this is it.
That's awesome. Well, I've always told you 30 plus years is incredible to me. I feel like, to me, barely starting, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a long way. But to me, that doesn't say, oh my gosh, that's a lot of time in education. No, it tells me the amount of experience and the amount of situations and encounterments and interactions that you have had, because in a simple year, it's like 25 students, 25, 30. And if you amount them, it's like you've inspired more than like 200 students in your lifetime, which is incredible to me. And that's super, super awesome. So I applaud you for that. Yes.
Thank you.
So I do want to go ahead and start off. I kind of sectioned the questions that I wanted to ask you. So to begin with, let's talk about your background and selection. So can you kind of describe your role on campus and how you became involved in curriculum leadership?
Well, originally, I was in the classroom, and I did have several people tell me, that I should become an instructional leader. I wasn't really pursuing it. Mm-hmm. I just had applied for the job, and then I got the position, and then I did miss my students a lot when I first left. But I did learn, through the years that I've been there, that it's been, very beneficial to be there, because I'm not just empowering, the teachers, and I'm not working directly with the scholars anymore. Of course, aside from those at-risk scholars, which is just a handful of students, but I'm a leader in curriculum, and I'm supposed to support the teachers on what they do, and I indirectly help. By helping teachers, I indirectly help students as well. Mm-hmm. So my role in this position is to, analyze data with teachers, provide with strategies, do walkthroughs in the classroom, provide teachers that important feedback that they need in order for them to improve their educational, strategies and their instructional best practices, I guess you would say, providing those PD opportunities or, those professional development trainings, how to analyze the data, and just it's a lot. Like, if I had to describe it here, we can probably sit here, for like an hour or so, describing what I do, but it entails a lot. But for I guess the most important part of this job is ensuring that you are providing that, that support for the teachers, the students, and then the leadership team and the campus to make sure that, you're driving that, the student achievement.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, like you said, it's about providing, that overall support, like you said, and truly diving yourself into not just the classroom now, but into different classrooms. I feel like that's kind of like its own world. Like, it used to be just your own four walls, and now you're going to different teachers and seeing different strategies being implemented, different differentiation instructions, simply different accommodations that you see that maybe you don't necessarily need to have them, physically with you, but just by, observing and seeing, you can see how each teacher has truly formed a culturally responsive classroom where, you're meeting the needs of everyone and truly ensuring, that equitableness throughout your classroom and for you throughout your campus. So what experiences or qualifications do you think helped you when it came to becoming a curriculum coach?
Like you said before, when I introduced myself and I talked about the years of experience that I've had, and when you commented, like, how many kids I've had to teach, or, how many different experiences I've had. So what's been great about those 30 years and being in different, positions at that time is gaining that knowledge, gaining that experience that, even now, as teachers, as educators, we continue to evolve and we continue to learn. We will never learn everything, but, it was the experience, going through several different teachers, different ways of teaching, different leaderships. I would say that, that kind of gave me what I needed and the drive for me to, push what I know works and what I know it doesn't, so that we can kind of step away from those practices and, try to implement what is going to help every single child in the class be successful. So I believe that is the experience that I brought into this position.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, that's a lot to really consider, because a lot of people, sadly, they think about education and they want to handle it like a business, and they say that's the best and that's the most efficient way, But, throughout my studies and throughout the courses I've taken, throughout all of my academic years, like especially in college and now in graduate school, I've learned that education, it can be effective when you treat it like a business to a certain degree. That you have those components, those factors, right? When it comes to working with numbers, when it comes to strategies, budgeting, this, that, the other. But I feel like sometimes a lot of people forget to realize that there's that human interaction and there's that continuous, absorption of material, that you're not only projecting yourself, but you truly are teaching those students and those kiddos, but also those teachers around you, like first year teachers like myself. I find myself just observing everything and everyone. Like when I was at Cactus Trails, I was like, oh my gosh, like I loved seeing the way, specific teachers would, line up their kids, how they would teach. I would like peek into classrooms and see, like, I wonder what they're doing. I wonder how they're doing it. And I would just stand there sometimes and just look at them. And it's really interesting to see how all of that kind of builds that, that human connection, that connection and that connectivity that you have when it comes to interactions and things like that. So now kind of getting into the perceptions, how would you describe your leadership style, and how do others typically perceive your approach to curriculum and instruction? Include your strengths and your weaknesses if you'd like.
I think I'm my biggest critic. I always want to go above and beyond. I'm very competitive. So when we're looking at, data from, different schools or, even other districts, I take it personal and I want to, ensure that no, we can do better than that. If those students can do good, then we can do, even better. So my leadership style is, do research. Think about, like, I'm very thoughtful in the way that I deliver, I guess, what I want teachers to do in the classroom. I think about it. I think about, different perspectives and things like that. But I'm more like, this is not working. We've tried it. Now we need to try this other way because I've seen it work time and time again. So I'm that type of leader that, yes, is very reflective, but, I also, like things done a certain way. I'm very organized and I'm very structured. So I would say that that's kind of like one of my weaknesses because, sometimes I tend not to be that flexible. Like, it is what it is and we're going to do what we're going to do, but, and at the same time, I've learned to be flexible. Like in this position, I was able to say, oh, okay, there are some things that we can be flexible with, and then there are other things that we can't. So those things I've learned, and so I guess my leadership style is more like, go straight to the point. Yes, we're going to analyze and we're going to look at all possible outcomes to a problem or a solution, and then I'll take it from there. I won't jump into right away into something that just because I've heard about it or because I want to do it. I like to analyze what I have first, and then how are teachers going to respond to that. So my delivery is like, I have to present you purposes and why we do the things that we do. If I don't do that, then teachers are not going to buy it in. So I have to sell it to them. I have to let them know why it works and what the purpose of it is. So yes, I'm very, I could be very strict, but then, thank goodness, in this position, I've learned to be a little more flexible.
That's good because you're growing as an individual and you're not changing who you are. You're simply, learning to adapt with others and learning to adapt to the whole schedule and learning to adapt to things and how they should be. Because if there's things that you shouldn't be flexible with, then no one should tell you, hey, we need to be flexible with this because simply it requires that rigor, that firmness, that attentiveness, So it's really good that you're seeing your weaknesses. I see them as strengths as well because being an organized person, it takes a lot. But in the end, it's very beneficial because when you're looking simply for a file on your desktop, you don't have all of your desktop full of files and this and that and the other. And it's really important because a person with a lot of clutter usually tends to kind of, they do know where everything's at, but it takes them a little more to find it, to this, to that, the other. So it's really nice that you're always 10 steps ahead. You're always adapting because as teachers, we always have to adapt. You might have this perfect plan, this perfect instruction, these perfect activities, but in the end, there's something that always, not goes wrong, but there's always something that catches you off guard, and you have to be able to learn to, adapt and overcome and just push through.
Yes.
Awesome. So then, moving on to the key leadership characteristics. What do you believe are the most important qualities a curriculum leader must have in today's society?
I think they have to come in with an open mind, still with humble, make sure that they continue to be humble because we continue to learn. We continue to evolve, and just because in my 30 years that I've had of experience doesn't mean that I already know it all. I'm learning year by year. Everything has been changing. I mean, COVID was a big eye opener to yes, we can adapt and we can, be flexible and we can modify and we can change and do different things. That I think that was one of the biggest shifts that we've had, as far as in education. I think for those that, had their mind open, it gave them a new perspective in life. And it's like, you know what, it's never, for me, I'm something years old and I'm going back to school, right? So to me, it's like, okay, it's never too late to learn. I'm a learner. I love learning new things, new stuff. But in this leadership, the characteristics that you need to have is to be able to evolve, is to be able to provide with new and innovative practices for the kids, and you just need to be able to go with the flow, and like I said, I'm not that flexible, but I'm learning, and the good thing is that I continue, to learn. And one of the things that I said when I was leaving my campus last time is like, I'm glad because those 6 years I didn't take it as, I'm the teacher of teachers and I'm going to go and teach you. I actually took the opportunity to also learn from them. So it's a learning process. You're always going to be learning. You're always going to be implementing new things. You get new leadership, that is above you. And so you need to implement those things. You need to learn them. You need to ensure that you're providing those trainings to teachers, that you're giving them all the information that there is, and that you also make leaders of those teachers, like provide that leadership. And though you don't want to be the one to know it all, but you also want your teachers to know what you know, or even beyond, So I think those are some of the characteristics that a curriculum leader should have. And then also know how to run data.
Yes, that's really important.
Yeah.
I realized when we would do the PLCs, it was a lot of Excel sheets, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to use, like, when I first started using them, I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, I don't know how to, like, if I press this, it moves this, if I press that, it moves that. I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, I don't. So I slowly, started getting myself a little more used to, the Excel sheets, the iStation reports. I remember that I would ask you, I'd be like, oh my gosh, like, what does this mean? How I just pressed this and it showed me all of these graphs, and there's green, there's yellow, there's red. I don't know what this all means. The bar graphs, the percentages. And it's really interesting the way that that you were able to break it down for me so simple, but yet so in depth at the same time, because I was like, oh, like I would listen and I'd be like, oh, okay, like I would see where you would click and move, and I'd be like, okay, I'm trying to follow the cursor. Where's the cursor? Yeah. So I could go ahead, and kind of, get used to the whole, just looking for the data, but then also learning how to process it. And that was,
and we have a plethora of data. Like, we have so much data, that we pull from to make sure that, our kids, but we also need to know how to use what data, mm-hmm. and how to use, that data for, mm-hmm. our instructional purposes. If we have a plethora of data, but if we don't know what to look for, then we're going to be lost and we're not going to know what to do. So yeah, that's another characteristic for a curriculum coach to have. Just know how to read data, which data is important to pull, and, which one is going to give you what you need. So, yeah.
So kind of piggybacking off on what you just said, the approach and the process of analyzing that data, how do you think, or from where, as a curriculum coach, do you know what to pull, where to pull it from? Like, how do you guide yourself on those, on that process of, I need to find, comprehension, I need to do this. Like, who tells you, or what tells you where you have to go, what you have to pull?
Yes. So data tells you a couple of different things, right? It tells you how you're doing as a teacher and whether the practices that you're doing work, mm-hmm. right? If they don't, and then that's when the reflection comes in, and then you modify your instruction. And then you have the data that is particular for those students that are in need, and what does the data tell you? Or even not just the kids that are in need, but also the ones that are ready to move on. So you have those two types of data. You have the teacher data that is going to help you, reflect on your practices, and then you have the student data, which is going to help you, close the gaps between, within your students. So when I'm looking at data, I'm looking at, for instance, for the scholars, I would look at, how they're doing. And as you know, at our district, we have 4 and 9 week, assessments. So you look at that data, and then you look at the students, what is it that if you were able to teach the content that you are assessing, then what is it that the student did not learn? Do the majority of your students didn't get that certain standard? And if they didn't, then that's when you reflect as a teacher, was my instruction effective? And if it wasn't effective, then what do I need to do? But if you have a handful of students, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 students that didn't get it, then that means that, your instruction was effective because most of your kids got it, but you still have this handful of students that didn't get it. So that's when you analyze the student, individually and say, okay, this is the group of students that I'm going to work for this. So I think it's very important knowing what to pull and, how to look at the data. And, the good thing is that for the most part, at our campus where I was, a lot of the teachers already know how to, what to look for. But yeah, it is important, to look at some reports, and some reports are going to give you general information, as to where you are, as a grade level, as a campus. But, I think the most important one is the teacher and the student data that you can pull from those reports.
Awesome. So when it comes to pulling from the reports, what types of data do you rely on most frequently? Like, for example, do you guys look at a lot of benchmarks, assessments, classroom observations, possibly as well? Because obviously you can obtain a lot from that. Attendance, do you guys look at attendance, behavioral data?
Yes, so for the most part, as a curriculum coach, we look at academic data. Right. And yes, observational data. We go into the classroom and we can tell you, what scholar, needs that extra help, which scholar is going to need a small group, just by looking at how they answer questions, how they interact with the class and things like that. As far as, the data that we pull to analyze, yes, we use it from interim assessments from the state. That one's very important because you have your beginning of year, and then you kind of have your towards end of the year data, like, what growth have you seen? But of course, you don't want to wait, a whole year for you to take the second benchmark and find out that your scholars have not made any growth, right? Mm-hmm. So you have those 4-week and 9-week assessment where you look at that data before you go further, and then your kids are lost completely, for the whole year. So yes, we look at our campus data, we look at our 4 weeks, our 9 weeks observational data. Behavior does have something to do with it, and that's like a different type of approach that we take with those scholars. And rarely, if you have very good classroom management, a lot of the times you're not going to have those behavior problems. Even with students that have behaviors, you can learn to make those connections with those scholars so that they can perform for you. So mostly it's academic data. And then, teachers in the classroom, we have our 4 and 9 week assessment that we analyze, but I know teachers in the classroom have their weekly check-ins with them and things like that. So, that's also another type of data that they have, so we're not letting students fall behind. We're continuously looking at data and ensuring that, that we are on it, before they have bigger gaps.
Yes. So then what kinds of technology tools or platforms do you utilize when it comes to data collection and then the analyzing part?
As you mentioned before, we have Excel, but we do have this platform that the district does provide for us. It's called Eduphoria, and they have several reports that we can pull. They pull reports such as, learning categories. You can pull reports as student responses. You can pull holistic reports, for campus, teachers, grade levels. You have reports that are going to let you know what the learning standard breakdown. How did the student do for each one of those standards? So we do have that platform. It's really good. And of course, we have our programs like the iStation reports that we run, or the CLI. The Texas Kia that give you the reports, whether the students know their letters, their sounds, their numbers, do they know their motor skills? And these are for the lower grades. So we have, like I mentioned before, we do have a plethora of data, that we can collect, different platforms that we can collect from. It's just knowing what to look for. Mm-hmm. And so, like I said, we have Eduphoria, we have iStation, we have Imagine Math, data that we can pull from. The most important one, and the one that we do use because we do test our scholars in Eduphoria, is probably Eduphoria, because they do kind of, work with us. And then once we pull those reports, then we're able to look at, subgroups through Excel. We can look at our SPED population. We can look at our demographics, those bilingual scholars, how they're progressing and things like that. So I think it's a very good platform, Eduphoria, because they work with us also.
Awesome. That's awesome. It sounds like technology isn't necessarily per se your best friend, but one of those best friends that you rely on in the most part, because I remember, and I know a lot of teachers that used to tell me, oh my gosh, when it comes to data, when it comes to attendance, everything used to be just on paper, and it would be these whole stacks of paper. And now it's evolved a lot. And now, with technology, it's never ending. I feel like, it's not just on, the new version of iPhone or the new version of Samsung, but phones and laptops and computers and desktops and printers. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is insane. Like the way the human brain works, and the way that, they're getting a machine remotely to do a lot of things when it comes to organizing, when it comes to, storing, categorizing, alphabetizing. Like I remember when I was barely getting into, Word documents, I used to be like, that's so cool. Like I can replace the word also with instead. Like it was awesome. Right. Like it just scans the whole document for you, and now with the upbringing of artificial intelligence, I feel like at first I was like, I'm a little bit hesitant about that. But then when you see schools, Magic School that you see online, it's kind of not replacing you lesson planning, but it's taking away all of that time that you invest in lesson planning, and it allows you to actually execute and see, okay, this is the activity, this is how I want my students, to kind of travel alongside the activity. And, this is the overall objective that I need them to master, that the state needs them to master in this grade level. So it's really interesting how technology has now played a really, really important part when it comes to, not just teaching, but, gathering data, analyzing the data, storing the data, organizing it, and just, having it, because you always need it. And you wouldn't have space in your room probably if you had the data from, I don't know, like 5 years ago, but on a little USB, you have it there. So that is awesome. Is there an example of how you've used data to drive a specific instructional change or intervention? And we can go ahead and close it off with this, because I feel like you've answered very much a lot of the questions. I had like 20 questions, but I feel like as the conversation has gone, you've answered
like I've answered.
Of them. Yes. So I'm like, okay, that one's checked off.
Okay. Let me see. Let me think of one example. That at our school we have PLCs, which is a professional learning community, right? Yes. So when we are analyzing data, the teachers are there and they're looking at data. So we're looking at, let's say that we're looking at a specific TEK, okay, and a certain teacher did really good on that TEK, or and then another teacher did really good on another TEK. And so, one thing that we can probably do is, create rotations based on those standards that teachers, mastered in their classroom, because then they're teaching, that their teaching was effective. So, in that community, you can either go and teach it to the other teachers and let them know, this is how I deliver the lesson, or create those rotations to where you're going to send your students to those teachers that have mastered that standard, and then teach it to them. Mm-hmm. So it's a collaboration. It's the trust that you have in the teachers. So I apologize.
It's okay.
So it's just that could be one example when you're looking at data, right? Those are some of the actionable, things that you can do in order for you to, to ensure that everybody's getting the same quality of instruction.
Yes.
So you just kind of, break it down, who does best with what, and then you can do those rotations, or you can come and you can teach it to the other students, to the other teachers. I'm sorry. Another thing that you can do is probably if it's a small group of scholars that you are working with. At our school, we have Super School, and it's called Rise and Shine. So during those 45 minutes, you are not going to teach. One of the things that you need to, or teachers need to know, is that if you have to reteach something, you're not going to teach it the same way that, that you did during your first teach. You have to ensure that, okay, now these students didn't get it in the first teach, even though it was a tier 1 instruction. And now it has to be a tier 2, mm-hmm. or probably tier 3, depending on how low the kiddos came out. Mm-hmm. And so you need to deliver that lesson, based on how the students did. So is it a tier 2? Is it a tier 3 instruction that you have to do now? So the teach has to be completely different, and you have to use whatever resources you have available, to ensure that the students are getting it this time around.
Yes. Awesome. Yep. Well, that was awesome. And it's really nice, to obviously always hear and always understand and just learn, in my case, learn from individuals like yourself that, they're like I've told you countless of times when you told me that you were getting your master's, I was like, oh, wow, like that's awesome. The fact that, you're making your change and you're not stopping there. Like I've seen a lot of educators, and those are like the most impactful ones that really hit home, and they encouraged me to do and be my best, because, that's always been my goal. Like when I was little, I told my mom, and I've always told my mom, I want to be a teacher. Like that's my calling. That's who I'm meant to be. And the more and more I like submerge myself in the profession, I encounter individuals like you that honestly, I can say that, and I can see it, like in the person that you are. I can see that you've inspired a lot of students and a lot of parents, a lot of teachers, and I can truly tell that you're making, that impact and that change that truly transforms a life, and it ultimately, it just fosters our future generation, and it makes me so excited because, for someone to graduate high school, or for someone to graduate from college and still remember you and say, hey, Miss Llerena, like this is like, remember you used to teach me 5th grade math, or remember when you used to, and it's just awesome, and the fact that, you're still in this profession, and that you grew so fond to it, and, you're not stopping, and you're still, you're still pushing through, and you're still saying, okay, what else can I do? Like you're hungry for more, and that's awesome, because you're finding new ways to evolve and new ways to just grow as a professional, but as well as an individual, and it truly takes a lot. And, just thank you so much for allowing me to interview you, and for allowing me to ask you all of these questions, and for all of the many questions you answered when I was at Cactus. It was honestly awesome.
And you also have that drive, Miss Flores. So I know you have that spark in you, and you're gonna do great. I believe that you're gonna do amazing in the years to come. So keep at it, and great job. And you did amazing, when you were at our campus. So, and thank you for asking me to be here, sitting down with you, answering these questions.
No, yes, ma'am. If there's anything else that you may need from me, I'm just a text away. Anything when it comes to, it doesn't matter. I'm here. But again, thank you so much. I'm not going to take up any more time of yours. So you can enjoy your day. And I hope you keep resting and, getting better and recovering.
Thank you. You too. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mom. Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.